Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network, leaders in my network, current growing network, everybody that I've connected with. So these are great leads to get to those books that have impacted their lives, whether it's to them as a worker, entrepreneur, coach, teacher, citizen, whatever it may be, all those worlds intersect. And in this podcast, I have three categories of books that I cover. The first category where they're sharing with me a book that I haven't read at all. The second category where we're discussing a book we've both read, whether we covered it specifically for that episode or we've read it before the series. And then the third category where I have the author and or publisher on to discuss the book that they're putting out there, to give it a face, to give it a tone, to give it a story, to get it out there to the masses. And my guest today is Sheryl Green. And per Sheryl herself, she's taken people pleasing to Olympic levels. For decades, she put everyone else's needs above her own until she hit a metaphorical brick wall. After committing to one too many responsibilities, Sheryl discovered the importance of boundaries. And as she says, okay, she actually discovered that boundaries were actually a thing. Now she is the how to say no expert, working with individuals and organizations to establish healthy boundaries to improve relationships, communication, and well-being. Sheryl has a master's degree in forensic psychology and is the author of 7 books, including You Had Me at No, How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity. And to learn more about Sheryl, you can visit her website, SherylGreenSpeaks.com. Sheryl, thank you for sitting down with me for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I always start off, who are you today, Sheryl? If you could go into the work that you do on a day-to-day basis today. I read your background, your biography. That obviously only tells us so much. So what are you up to these days?
These days, I am speaking and training about healthy boundaries. But I've actually just added something which it's going out today, which is super exciting. I want to start doing research and learning more because so often people ask me, who has it worse, men or women, when it comes to setting boundaries? And I'll be honest, I've always said women. We've got that extra layer of, caretaking and that training that we are supposed to be the mother to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I'm speaking to men and the more that I'm working in this field, I'm not so sure that's true. So I have a survey going out today, and I want to know the differences between how men and women experience boundaries and the challenges they have.
Can you speak a little more about that? Only because I'm seeing more and more about men's health online. And this is not to take anything away from women at all. But I appreciate the fact that you started with one belief and then based on what you were seeing, you're like, wait, hold on, there may be something that's going on with men as well. So can you speak a little bit about that? What are your thoughts so far on just what you're seeing? Not giving away the store, but yeah, a little more of your thought process of going from thinking it was women to maybe there's something with men as well. How did that evolve?
It's so, when I started out with this, it was honestly because I had a problem with boundaries or a complete lack thereof. And I assumed other people had that issue. And every time I spoke to women, they were like, "Oh yeah, no, I no is not in my vocabulary. I've always had a challenge with this." And some of the men, most of the men that I spoke to, didn't seem to have that issue. They were okay speaking up for themselves, standing up for themselves, and not trying to be everything to everyone. And it's funny, it was a couple of weeks ago, I did a book fair at the library. And again, normally my audience is women. Every single person that bought my book that day was male, and they were all buying it for themselves. And it was just this realization that, you know what, maybe how I'm looking at boundaries, maybe that's not how men see it. Maybe there's different symptoms, let's use that word, different symptoms that men experience that also are attributed to boundaries, but maybe they don't see it that way. So I'm excited to talk. I've got a bunch of base questions, but I also have the open-ended tell me your experience. Tell me what this has been like for you. And what am I not touching on? Because I am a woman. And
Yeah.
because I'm not in your brain. So
I fucking love that. I love that so much. And again, I always say this. I just posted something about I think it was an article in the Atlantic, Are Men Okay? And this was just yesterday on LinkedIn. And as I posted in there, this is not about a zero-sum game. This isn't about taking from any other group.
yes.
But I do appreciate, it's amazing where I see it now as I appreciate, it sounds ridiculous, I know, but I appreciate when men have allies
Mhm. Yeah.
because of what we go through. And it isn't a zero sum game. And I think men should speak up more. And again, I want to push that idea that it's not a zero sum game. We can still be allies for everybody, whoever we choose to be allies for, but we got to take care of ourselves as well. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Me too. I'm excited. And you know what? When you talk about allies, that's a huge aspect of boundary setting, because when we do get better at setting our own boundaries and we do create healthy boundaries in our lives, we actually empower those around us to do it as well. And we're
Yeah.
better at accepting other people's boundaries.
Yes.
So I think this is a win-win for everyone. And I'm just
Absolutely.
looking forward to the participation.
Absolutely, because I think boundaries plays into your energy, and
Mhm.
your energy plays into your confidence. And once you're confident, really confident, very little can shake you. So when you're really confident where very little can shake you, you're not intimidated, you're not threatened by something else. Because I think so much of the hate, so much of the envy and the jealousy in this world that we're seeing now is based out of fear, right?
Yeah.
So I think the more people understand themselves, and it's ugly too, to open up who you are, to think about who you are,
Yeah.
where your traumas, where your disruptions, whatever they may be, come from to get to who you are today. I think so many of us went through that in the pandemic, really understanding who we are. And only when you strip down everything and start from the bottom can you really build up properly.
Yeah. It's, so many of us, me included, I will say, honestly, this book came out of a broken Kindle on a plane ride. I literally was sitting on a plane and, had a big decision to make, but my Kindle died. And I was sitting on that plane and I'm like, oh my God, I have 3 hours stuck with my own thoughts. That's effing
Yeah.
terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
truly. And that's after years of you know of work and of therapy and working with coaches and looking in, and I still was terrified of the thoughts in my own head. But the really cool thing is, every time that I have been, I will say forced, every time I've been forced to sit quietly and to look inside instead of having outside entertainment or whatever, uh, something amazing comes out of it.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
don't think we give ourselves, there's constant distractions these days, and I don't think we give ourselves the opportunity to really tune in and figure out what the hell is going on inside us.
Yeah. And it gives tune in a new meaning. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, um, yeah, but we
Yeah.
got into so much just in the first couple of minutes, but it's all applicable. Um, so what does your coaching look like, Cheryl? Can you break down what the work looks like with your clients, or what you offer, what kind of programming, individual, group, one-on-one, whatever it may be?
Right now, it's just one-on-one. I will be including group in the future. However, a big part of boundary work is looking at our past. And there's two aspects to this. One is really figuring out, why am I not setting boundaries? Why am I not comfortable speaking up for myself, standing up for myself? And really getting to the kind of crux of what caused that. And it's usually self-worth, it's usually self-confidence, it's usually I was taught that I'm here for everybody else, that my, how do I put this? That my purpose and my worth is based off of what I do for other people. So when we approach it from that mindset, of course you're not going to want to set boundaries. Of course you're not going to want to say no to people, because that's going to diminish your worth. So that's kind of the first step, is looking at your past, looking at those messages that you've been given throughout your life, and kind of dissecting them and replacing them with healthier beliefs. So are you an Edgar Allan Poe fan?
Lightly, like I couldn't quote it. I couldn't list off his stories or books, but enough.
He's always got things in the walls, and that are kind of controlling and that he's hearing. And I kind of liken it to that. We're going through our lives, and we have this record, or this recording, I think I just aged myself, playing in the background, telling us, this is your belief, this is your belief, this is how you should feel. And until we actually identify it and approach it from a different direction, it's going to keep playing. So let's find that. Let's find that belief, that unhealthy, not productive belief, and let's change that. The other side, and I call this rear view mirror work, because you don't just wake up one day and go, I know exactly where my boundaries are. Okay, that doesn't happen. Does not matter what you've learned, what skills you've brought on.
It looks more like a battlefield.
Yeah, seriously. It's more of, it's kind of finding where your boundaries are. And I do that with clients through this rear view mirror work. And we say, hey, let's look at those times in your life that you felt icky. And that is not a technical term, but damn it, I'm going to make it one.
It paints a picture, though.
Those experiences where you're just like, ooh, I don't like how that turned out. I don't like how I felt in that moment. That's usually where your boundary is. And so something happened, you reacted in a certain way, or you didn't react in a certain way, and that led to an outcome. And if you didn't like that outcome and you didn't like those feelings, that's your line. That's where that boundary is. So the great thing / the terrible thing is we are going to experience the same situations over and over and over again. And if you've ever been in an unhealthy relationship, it's not usually just one. You usually end up with the same partner time and time again, until you break that cycle, until you figure out, oops, don't like how this is going. Let me change directions. Let me have a different reaction. So that sucks, because you're going to keep reliving it, but it's great because it means what's coming.
Yeah.
So you're going to have that situation again, different players, different setting, different experience, however, the same general situation. And then you get to do it differently.
Yeah.
So, you're in the future and you're in the present, I should say. And something happens and you're like, wait a second, this feels like a blip in the matrix. I've lived this before. I've done this before.
Yeah.
What did I do last time? Now I get to do something different.
Yeah, I think it's a learning process, but it's incredible how I'm 46 years old and I can still find those moments where I feel that way. And you can trace it all the way back to childhood. It's not a conscious recollection, because you're so used to doing it. It's a habit, every day, how you speak, how you respond to people based on tones you hear. And it's incredible how even the trickiest part is and I've spoken to so many people that are like, well, this is the process. And I know the process, or just different ways you can approach it. But it's incredible how you've lived so long one way in your life of having certain experiences, say the bad relationship. I know plenty of people that were like that, but that's like all you know for all your life. You spend your formative years learning, your programming, and then you go through the rest of your life programmed. And it's almost like the trickiest part, the hardest part of all of this is not necessarily stopping, but it's like, okay, what takes its place?
Yeah.
If I'm not this person cleaning up after this person in every form and way in a bad relationship, what am I then?
Yeah.
What is there to go to? It's not even like that people maybe don't want to. It's just like they don't know who they are without their habits that they live every day, their relationship types that they look for every day. It's incredible how, and most of them know, most of us do know, okay, this isn't what I want. We can feel it in our gut or we can say it
Right.
out loud. But the trickiest part is like, okay, I know that's not the way I want to do it, but what's the alternative? Like, how do I restart and reprogram at an older age? So it's an incredible journey. Even if it's a big issue or a smaller issue, no matter how old you are, you'll find those things that have just kind of followed you since childhood.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, I like to say you wouldn't give an 8-year-old the keys to your car. So why are you let them driving your life?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. That's a good one. Um, yeah, it is. I've just realized through the series how powerful that programming is.
Yeah.
Cheryl, when it comes to you to understand how you got to the work you're doing today, how you got to just this mindset that we've been talking about, how you look at life, your experiences, your work, can you tell me a little bit about your life in terms of from when you left school or entered the workforce from then to now? What does that path look like that has shaped who you are today in the work you're doing?
It's windy as all hell.
Wind is not
It's
bad. At least when you say it like that, at least it's a constant road that's windy where I've
it
seen
it
shit
is.
blown up or like redirected or under
It is.
construction signs, but
Yeah. No, there's been explosions and construction for sure.
okay, okay.
I used to be goth, and at least I'm wearing a color when I say this, because sometimes I'm wearing black during an interview, and I'm like, no, I used to be. I'm not anymore. I swear. But in high school, my goal was to hunt down serial killers. I was obsessed with them. And I went to school for forensic psychology, decided I was going to be an FBI profiler, and I was going to spend my days in the minds of evil humans, figuring out why they did what they did and how to stop them. And it's funny because my husband and I just had this conversation last night as we wrapped up Dexter.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm so glad I didn't get into the FBI, because
Which Dexter? Which series?
We finished the first series and then we just finished New Blood, the one
Okay.
one season of that. So we need to take a blood break for a little while. And then
That's what my wife says to me. She's like, yeah,
Oh,
we after a season of blood and whatnot, like we need something
yeah,
funny. So I
it's a
get you.
lot. It
Yeah.
is a lot. But we'll move on to Original Sin in a little bit. But I'm so glad that didn't pan out and that didn't work out, because it is not who I am today. But I went to school. Thankfully, I got my master's. I applied to the FBI and I failed the polygraph test twice.
Oof.
Yes. So the verdict is still out. I might be a terrorist. That was the question that I spiked on. But it
They're
just
probably
kind of
listening
like,
to this right
I
now.
know. I know. I still feel like they're watching my internet. But it just like dreams just dashed like right in that moment. It was like, okay, I didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
I just didn't. And I kind of bounced around from, banking to mortgages, like the back office stuff. And I did all these different jobs for a really long time. When I ended up getting divorced from my first husband, and I moved out. We were in North Carolina at the time. I'm originally from New York, but we moved out to Vegas, or I moved out to Vegas, excuse me, to be closer to my parents. And it was kind of this awakening time in my life. I went through a clinical depression because of the divorce and bankruptcy, like everything that came from that. And again, I was just trying to find myself. Like who is Sheryl? You know, I don't want to be that person. So who is, to your point, who am I now? And I remember going up to Best Friend's Animal Sanctuary. And it's the largest no-kill sanctuary in the country. It's in Utah. If anybody's an animal lover, like this is the pilgrimage you need to make. But I went up there and I was like, okay, I'm an animal person. Like, I love this. I want to get involved. I want to help. And I started volunteering and I started doing rescue work out here in Vegas. And at the same time, I was also writing. I took a writing class at the community college and loved it. Like, it was creative writing short stories. I started a novel and I absolutely loved it. Started writing mystery novels because one, I had grown up on them. Two, I had the experience with the forensic psychology. And three, I got to kill people that I didn't like in real life. So it was a very like cathartic process.
Yeah.
But I had these kind of two paths going at the same time. And then I added speaking. I was in a writer's group and the president took me under his wing and said, you are going to be on the board and you're going to be the critique group organizer and you're going to stand up at every meeting and explain what you do and how you can help people. And I looked at him and I was like, that's fine. But just so you know, I'm going to pee. I was terrified of public speaking, like absolutely terrified. And he sent me to Toastmasters and I worked through that program and decided that I actually truly love it. Like there is this high that comes from making people laugh. And that was the first like joy. But after that, people started coming up to me and saying, wow, your story inspired me. Wow, this helped me look at something different. Hey, I made changes in my life because of one of your talks.
So at that point, what were the talks about? What was it that you were sharing? Okay.
Resilience. Yeah, I had a hell of a divorce story. We'll leave it at my ex-husband is not allowed near schools.
Okay.
We'll just leave it there. So I had this, amazing divorce story and I overcame that depression through volunteering. So it was this, kind of redemption and I took control of my life and I helped other people in the process. So many people resonated with that. And I love knowing that I'm making a difference. That is just an amazing feeling. So I started speaking, but in the process, I was like, hey, I'm not making enough money to live right now. So what do I do? And someone suggested content writing. I'm like, okay, I can write. So I started my own business. And I'm trying to shorten this a little. When I had been volunteering and serving on the board of an animal rescue this entire time. And when COVID hit, my clients all disappeared overnight because who needs content writing when you don't know if the world is ending?
Yeah.
So, I lived alone. That was my only source of income. And I had a dog to feed. So, I went to the rescue and I said, I need to be hired. I need to be full-time. And they did. They brought me on. I worked full-time, which if you've ever been in the nonprofit world is not 8 hours a day, it's 10 or 12. And then on top of that, my clients started coming back and I couldn't afford the roof and the dog on the nonprofit salary. So I started taking them back and I got busier and busier and fell more and more behind. And my parents were getting older at that point and sicker and needing more of my attention. And there was just all these factors that just kept building up and building up and building up. And I never said no to anybody. You know, what do you need my help with? Where do you need me to serve? And I burned out. I didn't realize it at the time, but I almost drove into oncoming traffic one day. I saw those headlights and just thought, this could all be over. And the stress and the frustration and the guilt and the depression that I didn't realize I was back in, it all just came to a head. And I obviously I didn't drive into oncoming traffic, but I pulled over and calmed myself down and was like, hey, there's got to be something different I can do here. You know, looking at that past. And so took another 6 months of my clearing off my plate and then having my plate fill right back up for me to look at it and go, what just happened? And like, how did this happen again? And I realized it was boundaries. And that's kind of what got me here. Long story.
No, not at all. Not at all. So what was it about your younger life, just taking a step back, that you wanted to go into forensic psychology? You mentioned you liked reading mystery books, mystery novels. Where did that come from? Can you tell me a little bit about who you were as a kid that kind of led you into that path into school of forensic psychology?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I've fully looked into that yet. But I will say I was my parents were divorced when I was very young, and I lived with my mom and my grandparents. And my mom kind of set this up as it's you and me against the world. So at 15, at 16, when kids are differentiating from their parents and they're rebelling a little bit and they're stepping out and they're finding out who they are, I was kind of trained that the only form of accepted rebellion was to be like my mom, because she was already rebelling from the world. And I mean, I probably took it a little bit further with the goth. She wore all black and all of that. But it's funny because I was always a pretty positive, I was like a happy-go-lucky goth.
I can't pick.
I know.
I'm trying to picture all the goth kids that I knew in high school.
And
I don't think I came across one that was happy-go-lucky.
I didn't fit in, but I really have always been pretty, just pretty outgoing, kind of happy. Like I guess bubbly, yeah.
Okay.
But you know, my husband laughs. I've seen Marilyn Manson live in concert 29 times. I mean, I was like full on like metal industrial head. I was watching all the dark movies. I started studying serial killers probably when I was 13. And I was always kind of attracted and fascinated, but I always wanted to know how they came about, you know, what caused them to be the way they are. And it's funny because that's why I love Dexter.
So I love that series. I think I found that somebody shared that book at work. I think it was maybe the second or third book. And I mean, it was late though, because the series had already started. But just that whole psychology of what makes someone tick.
Yeah.
You know, making sure that the bad guys, aren't killed, but get their comeuppance kind of thing, like justice kind of thing. But what was it? I mean, you could trace this back. So you said your mom wore black. So was she part of that kind of world, or?
She was, my grandmother was super abusive to her physically, to me mostly emotionally. And I think she's always been rebelling against her.
Okay.
Even now, and my grandmother's been dead for, I don't know, 10 years now. But she was never as obsessed with serial killers and into that as I was. So I think I just kind of I saw a path and I was like, hey, I can kind of make this my own, even though I'm following in her footsteps in this way. And it's interesting because when I started writing the novel, when I moved out to Vegas, I was in therapy. My dad and my stepmom said, you can stay with us. You can, find your footing as long as you need. You just have to go to therapy. They're like, this experience has the potential to break you, and we're not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
So I went to therapy. I had a great therapist. And one day she used to tell me kind of more than she would tell everybody else, just because I have the background in psychology. And one day we're sitting there and she goes, Sheryl, she goes, you have the perfect upbringing for schizophrenia. It's like,
How do you take
gee,
that?
thanks. Like,
is that passive aggressive therapy talk? Like, what is that?
I'm like, what do I do with that? But what I
Yeah.
did with it is my first book was I split my personality into a detective and a serial killer. And they both started out in the same place, and one had a positive intervening factor person and the other one didn't. And like, I guess that's probably the best way that I've explored my childhood was, hey, this is what kind of did happen, even though I didn't become a detective, that this is what kind of did happen because my stepmom was this super healing, helpful person in my life. And this is what could have happened if she wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm no doctor, I'm no therapist, but I guess it makes sense just from your upbringing, the emotional toll from your grandmother, what your mom went through. Um, Anytime somebody suffers like that, they're just more curious about the world, they have to defend themselves. So it's almost like they don't have time to go happy, go lucky, because they have to step back and wait for the next rush of emotion.
Yeah.
And I think like if you're sitting back and waiting that other shoe's going to drop,
Yeah.
you have more patience, you stop, you're listening more to the world. And then, yeah, the goth, I mean, if you go into that crowd, because I was friends with some of them, I was one of these floaters that got along with everybody. But yeah, I mean, they'd go see like The Crow, or they were into like Nine Inch Nails, or
My
what I mean, like all
favorite
that stuff.
movie and my favorite band.
Yeah. I know it. See, I'm not playing. I know it. So I guess it does, to me, just from that story, it's kind of like it does make sense, because you kind of have to put your world on pause because you have so much coming at you that when you're pausing your life, you take in more of what's going on around you, that curiosity. And if you follow that crowd, obviously they're more into like the hardcore stuff, the serial killer movies,
Yeah.
horror and whatnot. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. So fast forward to today, and I think you've kind of spoken to this. The next question is, does it make sense from your childhood that this is what you're doing? How do you speak to that? Because I'm always curious about what somebody's doing today.
Yeah.
What is it from their childhood that feeds into that makes that possible, that wants that? So how do you reconcile your childhood to what you're doing today, and does it make sense?
So I'm 44 now. I'm right behind you. And I say that, my experience for boundaries, aside from the degree and everything and all the research, is 42 years of doing it the wrong way. 41, 42 years of doing it the wrong way. And I was not allowed to speak up. I was not allowed to put myself first. It was always, who am I taking care of? Who am I here to kind of please? It was one of those households with my grandmother of the children should be seen and not heard. It was that kind of experience only 10 times. So I never learned to set boundaries. And any time that maybe I even attempted to on my own, I was not allowed.
Mhm.
Like, it was made very clear, like, this is not okay. This is not what you get to do. And it's funny, I went into a new therapist. This is 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I was really in the thick of the depression and the, I guess, suicidal ideation. I walked in and she said, Sheryl, what do you need? And I 100% went like deer in headlights, just like eyes wide, like, head cocked to the side, and I was like, I don't even know what you're asking me right now.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever asked me that question because it didn't matter.
Mm. Yeah.
It didn't matter what I needed. It mattered what everybody else around me needed. So yes, what I am doing now is 100% informed from what I grew up in, and this mentality of you don't have the right to say no, and you don't have the right to have needs. And I learned that that wasn't the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and I built myself up to a point where I'm like, no, I get to have needs. Like I get to try and get those needs met. And now I'm just bringing people along for the ride.
This is a weird question. Very weird question.
Waiting.
But would you prefer to exist as you are today, doing this work, helping other people, or have gone down a different path where this is a stupid question, I'm not gonna lie. Or go down a path where you didn't experience any of that, and obviously we don't know what would have come from that path.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious always about I've spoken to people that have had traumas in their lives, and now they were doing phenomenal work helping people, writing books, speaking, changing fucking lives because they see people.
Yeah.
Because they have those traumas, they get shaken to the core. Daily interactions with grandma, however it was that she spoke to you. It's such a fucking weird question. I'm not gonna lie, but with the power you have today to listen to people, to see people, because you didn't have that yourself. And I don't think you can even answer this question, but maybe you can speak to the thought that I'm having. What do you think about that? Like, yes, and I've spoken to people that again have gone through stuff or have been diagnosed with things, and a lot of them say, "Listen, I wouldn't want to go through it again. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to,
Yeah.
but it made me who I am today." So how do you
Yeah.
speak to that? Because if you'd gone down a different path where the house was healthier,
Yeah.
your foundation was healthier, we will never know, but would you have made an impact on other people? Like, is it more about other people than yourself? Like, again, stupid fucking question. I
It's
don't even know how
not.
to answer, but how can you speak to that? Like, what am I just, talking out of my ass? Like, what do you think of that?
No, so there's a couple of answers to this. One, no, I agree with whoever said that to you. I wouldn't want to go through it again. However, I am grateful for everything I've experienced. I'm grateful for what my ex-husband did because I don't think anything else would have made me leave. I was the child of divorced parents, and I went into marriage going, I'm never getting divorced. Once I get married, this is it. I'm in it for the long haul. And I was not the best version of myself in that marriage. And I was not contributing my abilities and my gifts to the world when I was with him. So I'm grateful for that happening because it made me leave. It was the big enough kick in the ass that I needed to go, oh, got to change life. Like, this isn't going to work. Can't stay in my I'm comfy even though I'm not happy zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I am super grateful for everything I've been through. Do I still have a little bit of anger and resentment from it? Sure do. I'm constantly working to let go of that anger towards my grandmother and towards those early years. However, it made me who I am. It gave me the coping mechanisms, which were not healthy in the beginning, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
It sure as hell gave me the sense of humor. I think the funniest people out there are the ones that have gone through some dark shit.
Isn't that amazing?
You have to.
Why?
You have
Okay, can you
to.
speak to that? I'm always curious about. I wrote a blog post years ago about how, what the hell was it? Tying in like I think it was like leadership lessons from comedians or something to that
Yeah.
effect. But I've always been fascinated by just the comedic ability somebody has, or the comedic third eye they have, or the
Yeah.
sensitivity or whatever, and their ability to see what actually is. I mean, I just think they have like a higher level of seeing things, and
Yes.
we laugh so hard because they know how to put it into words. That's why
Yes.
we laugh, because we can relate to
Yeah.
them, but we don't have that. So
Yeah.
speak to your experiences and your comedic being, like your funny side. How do you tie
It's
those two together?
it's a protective mechanism, and I'll be the first one to say that. Honestly, I learned my sense of humor from my stepmom. She had been through hell. Like, life just gave her the short stick. Health wise, experience wise, abuse wise. I mean, she had just been through it, and she was honestly the funniest person that I've ever met. And listening to her comedy show was even better the night before surgeries, because she was so scared and she was so worried about what was to come. She was fucking hilarious.
What do you
And
mean
my
her
dad,
comedy
like,
show?
when she just started talking and
Oh,
she
okay,
just went
okay,
off funny,
okay,
nothing official.
okay.
But my dad and I just used to sit back and we would be laughing our asses off. But it was a protective mechanism. And it's
Yeah,
been the same for me. It's a way to deal with those difficult feelings, those difficult emotions. And you look at police work, honestly, I mean, gallows humor is very real. When you're when you're looking at just the lowest, like, basest um uh expressions of humanity, just this evil, like, day in day out, I am seeing the worst of things. You have to find humor or it will eat you alive. And it sounds screwed up from the outside, but I went through my graduate program with a friend of mine, and our last semester we were looking at FBI case files, and trying to find commonalities and things like that. And people do really bad shit to one another. I mean, there is some evil out there, which I'm actually not legally allowed to talk about, due to the FBI case files. But we used to look at these, like, crime scene pictures and just make jokes. And it wasn't out of disrespect for the victims. It wasn't to take anything away from the situation. It was just,
coping.
you
It's
had
coping.
to. It's just a coping and a defense mechanism. So I think that humor, honestly, I would not give up my sense of humor for anything. It has gotten me through the darkest of times. It has improved my writing. It has improved my speaking. It's how I relate to people.
Yeah,
Um, but I think the other side of that, would I give up those experiences, is the best people, the best coaches, the best therapists, the best social workers. They're people who can empathize because they've been through it. And I share this story. Years ago, a friend of mine called me. I've never had any human children. I've never given birth to a child. I have two stepsons now, but they're adults. But I've never given birth to a human child. And a friend of mine called me up, and she was 9 months pregnant. She's like, Sheryl, I'm so scared. And I was like, okay, I don't know why you called me, but
you're
okay,
like, I don't know what to do with that either.
I don't know. And I was like, can you call your mom? And she's like, I'm so scared that it's gonna hurt. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, again, I don't know why you're calling me. And we went back and forth like 5 times. And I was like, can you call someone that's been through this? And she's like, I'm just so scared. And finally I was like, dude, you should be. A human being is about to come ripping out of your body. That sounds fucking terrifying.
Yeah,
And she got really quiet and she went, I don't know why I called you.
me either. Like,
So, I don't want to learn about drug rehabilitation from somebody who's never had a problem with drugs. And I don't want to learn how to deal with setting healthy boundaries from somebody who has never had a problem. So I think it makes me a more equipped, a more qualified, and a more empathetic coach and
Yeah.
teacher, because I've been there. Because the person that says to me, "No is not in my vocabulary," I go, "Yeah, I get it. I was there too." And it's a different level than books and then classes can teach you. It's just a different level.
Yeah, I always appreciate when coaches that I've had on here come on and say that they have their own shit.
Yeah,
They have their own work to do.
yeah,
And I don't think that should take any value away from who they are as a coach, as a therapist, as a social worker, because the value in those fields is the curiosity that they have to push forward and learn more. So if somebody says, "Yeah, I'm a coach and I have my own coach. I'm a therapist and I have my own therapist. I'm a social
yeah,
worker and I talk to my social worker friends," and it to me, it's that greater curiosity you
yeah.
have. And again, like you said, it builds up that empathy in you if you've gone through those experiences. So it's definitely a power. Now, my next question is always, you've discussed a lot of different powers that you have. What do you consider your superpower?
It's a great question. I mean, I can change my pants really quickly. I don't know if that's a superpower, but I've always been pretty impressed. Um,
I always want to see what people will give themselves the ultimate credit for.
Honestly, it's empathy and sensitivity. And it wasn't until about probably 2 years ago that I found out that that was a superpower and not a weakness. There is a book out there called The Highly Sensitive Person. It's from Elaine Aron, and I think that's the name. And if anybody watching this, if people tell you you're too sensitive, or you cry too much, or you walk into a room and you can feel exactly what's going on before anybody opens their mouths, read the book,
Yeah.
because it was a blessing for me. I got that all the time. "Oh, you cry too much. You're too sensitive. You're too this." Um, and I always thought it was a weakness. Like, "Oh, well, I'm just not strong. I'm just, I'm just not as good as other people that can handle these emotions." And I read that book. My husband and I had just started dating, and I read the book, and then I handed it to him, and I said, "Someone wrote a user manual. This is
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
be in a relationship with me. Read it cover to cover and report back," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he did. He read it, and I remember talking after and him saying, "I had no idea that what was going on inside your head until I read this." He goes, "I'm never going to make fun of you for only being comfortable between like 70 and 72 degrees. If it goes lower, I'm cold. If it goes higher, I'm hot." And he read through it and he's like, "Oh, this is you to a T."
Yeah.
So it was helpful, and it actually kind of also explained how he and I ended up together, which was cool as well.
Which was what? Just a
There, and I'm gonna forget it. I'm gonna forget the exact terms. She talks about, I think it's like the royal, I don't know, one person brings wisdom and empathy, and the other person brings warrior spirit. And we balance each other out, because he is
gotcha.
the, like, coming running screaming, like, and I'm the, "Let's think about that,
Yeah.
but I'll just think about it and never take action." So we kind of balance each other. So really, I cannot recommend that book enough. There was a documentary which actually has Alanis Morissette in it, because she is also an HSP.
Okay.
And the documentary is good, but the book is better.
I'll have to check that. I think it's on my reading list. I think I've added it to my list on Amazon. Um, it stands out because in the past, I think it was an ex-girlfriend, we were having a conversation and she said something and a word stood out that she said. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what did you mean by that? And she's like, oh, you're just being sensitive. I'm like, am I though? Um, so I'm sure that book gives different examples of what that sensitivity is, because I think most people, when they have the idea of somebody being sensitive, it's that they hear something and automatically they're crying. That's just the only way that it
Yeah.
manifests. But I think it is like being in tune with an environment, walking into a room. It's incredible when shit like that happens. You're always wondering how somebody else thinks, how somebody else perceives the world. Like when you hear a story and it's a sad story, some people are just kind of like, is this person done yet or what? And then
Yeah.
the rest of us get dragged along for that ride. But
Yeah.
I think there's just so many different facets to it. It's definitely a book that I want to get to.
Yeah.
And then Cheryl, the last question before we jump into your book,
Mhm.
and I'd be remiss as a leadership coach if I didn't ask, what does leadership mean to you?
That's a great question. Um, Leadership to me means presenting and carrying yourself in a way that you're proud of and that other people want to follow and emulate. That is not an official definition, but
No, but I don't want, I don't know what an official definition would be,
yeah.
but I like that, making yourself, moving yourself, navigating in a
Mhm.
way that people want to follow. It
Yeah.
sounds so simple, but that's more of what we need of. Because
Mhm.
I think so many leaders come into it and they're like, this is what I want.
Right.
It starts from where we meet to me,
Right.
not where we meet to where you are to bring you over to where I am. So no, I get that. I completely understand that. It doesn't have to be official. I love when those words just kind of, the thoughts just kind of come to mind.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So now let's jump into your book. Can you just tell me the impetus for the book? What was it that triggered you thinking about a book? Actually, you had spoken about being
Yeah.
on an airplane. Was
Yeah.
that when you were starting to write this book?
It was. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had that rock bottom moment, in traffic, and I cleared my plate off. I did everything non-essential. I took a month off from the rescue and ended up not going back. I literally cleared my plate of everything that wasn't absolutely essential. And as I mentioned, it started filling back up. And one of those things was a friend of mine. So I'm part of the National Speakers Association at the Las Vegas chapter. And a
Mhm.
friend of mine was president at the time. And she came to me and said, Sheryl, I want you to be the incoming president. I want you to take over after me. And I had that, like, the angel and the devil on both sides. And I'm thinking, well, okay, one, everything I've accomplished up until that point was because of volunteering. It was because of serving and getting myself out there and networking. And this could be such a great opportunity to do all of those things. But on the other side, my business was not stable. I had started dating, and my husband and I moved very quickly. So I had started dating, and we got engaged about 6 weeks later.
Wow.
So
Okay.
maybe 8 weeks. We moved in together after about 4. So I was planning a wedding, and every time I plan an event, I have it in my head. It's not that much work. And then then I get into it and I was like, oh shit, yes, no, it is that much work. So I'm planning a wedding, and my parents now at this point are really, really requiring my assistance. So I knew it was a bad plan. And I actually took a few weeks of her asking me before I finally gave her the yes she wanted, because I didn't want to let down a friend. I didn't want to
Yeah.
disappoint her. And the second that I said yes, I swear every cell in my body was just like, what the fuck did you just do?
Yeah.
Truly, like this was a bad plan. And I spoke to I spoke to some friends, I spoke to my husband, I spoke to a chapter mentor, and he said to me, "You know what, Sheryl?" He goes, "Saying no now isn't bad because you can't serve the chapter in the way that it deserves. Saying no in 9 months when you've taken up all of the training, you've moved into the position, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that was the decision that I went into this plane ride with. But of course, I'm reading, I'm playing games, I'm doing all these things to distract myself because I know the answer and I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And when that Kindle just went, and I was like, man, why can't I say no? Like, what is this problem? And a friend had sent me a book recommendation months earlier that I kind of glossed over, but it was about boundaries. And it was literally in that moment, sitting on that plane, that I was just like, oh shit, this is the problem. This is what I need to deal with. And I outlined the book on the plane. Of course, I had to go and do all the research and all of that, but I'm running through my head and through my history and going like, oh my God, I have so many stories of not setting boundaries and not standing up for myself. And literally just outlined it. And I was like, I can't be the only one that has this problem. And I love to learn through reading and research and interviewing people. And what if I can help other people as I go along this journey? And so the book was definitely a journey. I will say I've never experienced imposter syndrome to the extent, and this was my 6th, 7th book, whatever it is. And I've ghostwritten books for other people. So this was not like I don't know if I can write a book. I can write a damn book, but I just had this like, who am I to be doing this? I'm not a therapist. I'm not all these things. Like, who am I? And every day I just had to sit down and talk myself off that ledge and go, you're going to help someone and you have this story to share.
So were all the previous books novels?
No. I wrote 3 novels. None of them were ever published.
Okay.
They're all sitting on my hard drive collecting dust. I switched over to nonfiction when I decided to be a speaker. So I have 1 book on resilience, 2 books on like business storytelling and cause marketing, 1 book on how to write a book, and then I did a project for the rescue on pet first aid. Okay. So yeah, so all different stuff. The resilience one was pretty much my story up until that point in my life, and how I overcame depression and how other people can do it. So this is kind of that return to personal development and psychology.
So when it comes to your book, how did you set up the book? How did you just spoke about outlining it on that plane.
Yeah.
What was that? How did you set it up? What was that path that you set the reader on just to walk them through the ability or the need to say no and the ability to set up boundaries? How do you lay out that path for them? What does the book look like?
Similar to my coaching, we start out with, why are you like this? Not in a negative way, but why are you at this stage in your life? What has your childhood experience been? What has those beliefs been? And then I talk about what boundaries are, because I don't think a lot of people actually understand them. There's a lot of things in our lives. We all pretty much equate saying no with boundaries. But I'll give you an example. I had someone, we're not close. We're friends on Facebook. I know him from years ago. And he messaged me on Facebook with a question and said, "Hey, sweetie." And I knew he didn't mean anything by it. I truly did. And yet I felt uncomfortable. There's only 2 people in this world that get to call me sweetie. One is my husband and the other one is my dad. I don't appreciate terms of endearment from strangers or from, colleagues or something like that. That's me. That may be cool with other people, and that's totally fine. Boundaries are very personal. But in the past, I never would have equated that with a boundary. I would have just been like, oh, well, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to make them uncomfortable, so I'll just let it go. So, kind of talking about what those boundaries are, how they show up in our lives, what you may be experiencing that's a sign of a boundary problem. And look, my goal, I don't ever want anybody to be facing oncoming headlights and have that thought. That was dark. That was probably one of the worst days of my life. And we don't have to get to that. If we learn how to set these healthy boundaries and we learn how to speak up for ourselves and advocate, we don't have to get there. Yeah, we're gonna get stressed, but burnout is a whole different beast.
Yeah. So then if you open up the book, can you give some of the names of the chapters just to kind of get a sense of what that walkthrough looks like?
Sure. And I don't remember if I did in this book, but I usually have funky chapter names. So nope, not in this one. So I talked about where boundaries come from. I talked about codependency because that's a big aspect of it. If you, again, if you've been raised to believe that other people have to need you for your self-worth, boundary problems are a hop, skip, and a jump away.
Yeah.
I talked about how to set boundaries and how to communicate them. But I also talked about other people's reactions. So I call some people boundary busters. And those are the people that you set a boundary and they don't accept it. And they push back. And look, you're going to get a little bit of pushback anyway because people don't like change. And if you've always been there for someone, then if you suddenly say, no, I can't do that, well, that's a change. And they're probably not going to love that. Yeah. But if they care about you and they love you and they value you, they're going to respect it and they're eventually going to come around. Boundary busters are the people that don't. They're the ones that will push you, manipulate you, guilt you, and try to get you to change back to the original version, to the Sheryl 1.0 that they were able to manipulate.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. A lot of people's fear around boundary setting is what is the outcome going to be, and
how are people going to see me? What does it do to my reputation?
Yeah. It's a legitimate fear. We can't control anybody else. We can only control ourselves. So yeah, every once in a while, you are going to have somebody that is a true boundary buster and they're actually showing you their true colors. And if they don't value you and they don't value and accept your boundaries, why are they in your life? And do they deserve to be moving forward?
Sheryl, what's your take? I saw something on Facebook, not Facebook, LinkedIn, somebody speaking to the power of no, and that no is just, it's one word. Like that's all you have to say. Something about the way they wrote it. I'm just like, that's not feasible. Like you can't just say, and it depends on the environment.
Yes.
Depends on the environment.
Yes.
But you can't just say no. So this is kind of like a bridge between saying no and not. How do you say no, but still kind of not give an excuse, but some kind of context that it's no right now, but I'm still game. I'm still your partner, but I don't have the capacity for this, or not making excuses. Cause I feel like certain people think you just say no and that's it. You don't owe anybody anything else. And I don't think you do owe anybody anything else. But if you want to continue a working relationship, my belief is like you have to give some kind of context, that just saying no, like one word, is just rude. So how do you speak to that? Because I've seen that so much where people are like, you just have to say no. You don't have to explain yourself. But it's like, okay, but in reality, if you're at work or if you're in a relationship, I don't want my partners in those environments or anywhere else just saying no. I would probably want to hear why not. Like, what can I help you with? Or maybe I'm maybe I am pushing too much on your boundaries. So how do you speak to that bridge between establishing your boundary, but at the same time giving it some context.
So first I need to like get my soapbox out so I can hop up on that.
Sure.
The opening line to one of my keynotes is no is not a complete sentence. So I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because grammatically, of course it is, but it's this like oversimplified concept. And you're 100% right. Could you just say no? Sure. If you are in a bar and someone is hitting on you, and
absolutely.
you have absolutely no interest, no
Absolutely.
is great. Hand up is great. Throwing a drink in their face, whatever that warrants. But when it comes to your boss, your clients, your spouse, or your significant other, as I like to call them, a good friend, somebody that you want to continue a relationship with, no is not going to cut it. It's just not. And I think it is a very dangerous statement that's going around. This no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
No, you don't owe anybody an answer. You truly don't. However, I like to say that, especially in the workplace, no is not a sign of insubordination. It's an invitation to a conversation. It should be the opening to a negotiation, not to keep rhyming. But, if your boss comes to you and says, I need you to do this, and you can't. Now, I'm not saying you don't feel like it. You're sitting there playing Tetris on your computer, but you legitimately can't. Your plate is full. This would require overtime. This would require something falling through the cracks. This would force you to do a half-assed job on whatever else you're doing. It's a conversation. I understand that this is important to you, and I can't do this to the capacity, in the way, with the deadline, whatever it is that you're asking for. So can we look at my other responsibilities? Can we maybe take something off my plate, shift a due date so that I have time? Like, let's talk about priorities right now. When it comes to a personal interaction, your spouse or somebody or a friend, I had someone say this to me before I wrote the book. And it kind of like made me twitch at the moment. But after I started having better boundaries, I understood this was the best answer she could have given me. She said, Sheryl, I'm so sorry. I can't support you in that way right now.
That's a handful of words. It says no.
Yeah,
it
but
says, listen,
nicely.
I respect you. I respect you. This is my decision. And right now.
Yes.
Like that covers everything in 7, 8 words.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
I see that so much on LinkedIn where it's like, no is all you have to say. You don't owe anybody. It's like, that's not realistic. Unless you're being hit on at a bar, unless it's somebody where you don't have a stake in building that relationship further. But everyone else, you don't owe an excuse, but maybe context.
Yeah. Context and understanding that this is important to them in some way.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest, even like if you've got some customer service people watching, my husband and I travel quite a bit, and we were at a restaurant in a hotel, and I asked the waitress, I don't eat like bacon, so I know that's super weird. But I was like, hey, can I get an extra egg instead of the bacon? Or can I get some fruit? No.
Yeah, exactly. Do you hear that cliff? Do you hear that cliff after that exclamation point? That's what I'm talking about. It's like, no, I'm sorry, we can't do substitutes.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. That's the manager doesn't allow us to do that. It's we can't do that. Our chef is new. Like anything, but even just an I'm sorry would have sufficed. But no. Cool.
Yeah, exact. That's the thing. It's like, where do you pick up the conversation after? It's like this
Yeah.
empty vacuum of space where
Yep.
it's like you don't even know how to, you don't know what to do with that. Another moment
Yeah.
of not knowing what to do with that. Oh, can you give a couple more examples of chapter titles if you could?
Sure.
I just
Um,
had to jump in with that thing that I
yeah,
saw on
yeah,
LinkedIn because it's always been,
yeah. I trust me, I appreciate it.
and it's amazing how many people jump in and they're like, this.
Yeah.
And like, I
Yeah.
agree, like, absolutely 100%. I'm like, oh my God, we're never
I'm like,
going to
no.
understand each other. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I talk about boundary buddies, which is the opposite of boundary busters. These are the people that help you, support you, can be a sounding board. Um, and then boundary backslides, which we all have. I still have them, and every time I have one, I write a blog because I want it to be a teaching moment for me and for everyone else. But you have the option when you fail to enforce a boundary, and I don't say fail in a negative way. But when you don't enforce a boundary, you have the option. It's like going off your diet. Do you like, oh no, I had a piece of cake. Okay, well, are you gonna sit down and eat the entire cake now? Or are you going to be like, oh crap, all right, back on the wagon again tomorrow?
yeah, yeah.
So, really not beating yourself up for those boundary backslides, but learning from them.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm choking on my smoothie.
No, that's all right.
And then, one of the things that I found really cool was when I was researching this was the why are boundaries more difficult with some people than with others. And it's kind of obvious that the people that there are higher risk relationships, that the
Yeah.
outcome could be worse. It makes sense that it's going to be harder to set a boundary with your spouse, your mom, or your boss than it is with the hairdresser or the grocery bagger. But there's actually other things that factor into how easy it is to set a boundary with somebody, and that was some of the cool research that I got to do for this.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And I'm curious. I always ask the authors that come on, what changed or evolved in you
Yeah.
having put out this book? How did it make you look at the material, at the idea of boundaries in a different way? What changed in you in putting out this book?
I see the world through different lenses. I really do. I see the world as full of opportunities to set boundaries that, again, I never attributed any of these things to the overall umbrella of boundaries. It's given me free time. I will say that. I used to run, my friend said, Mach 5 with your hair on fire. And I was always busy. I was always doing something. I was always doing something for someone else. It has helped me be more focused. And I do want to mention that I still do things for other people. I still volunteer. I still donate. I still
Yeah.
help my friends.
I didn't picture you coming to the door of your house all the time saying, no.
No. But some people look at boundaries and they think, well, now I have to say no all the time. Well, that's its own issue, and we don't have time to get into that, but it's in the book. But the goal of setting boundaries is not to turn you into a selfish, self-centered son of a bitch that doesn't do anything for anyone else. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
The goal of boundaries is to create a sustainable, and that's my new favorite word, a sustainable lifestyle, a sustainable career, sustainable relationships.
Yeah.
That you can continue doing what you do for the long run instead of experiencing burnout, instead of no longer being capable because you are sick or you you go through this horrible experience that takes you out of the game. And I will say I'm useless, to animal rescue at this point. I passed a line of no return with my burnout. And while I'll always share and I'll always donate and I'll do those things, I'm useless to animal rescue. Don't get there. Don't get, learn how to set your boundaries, learn how to fill up your cup and make sure that your cup isn't broken and leaking so that you can fill everybody else's.
Very great way to put it. Sheryl, what do you think? I know you've written a lot, have a lot of books out there, some that are still collecting dust on your hard drive, but what do you think? What do you think would be, I don't know how far out you might be doing it, but what do you think is next for your writing? Even a general idea or direction that you want to go in?
Yeah, so I really want to explore the concept of self-leadership more. And it's going to be kind of an expansion of boundaries. I'll have all this wonderful research from my survey to kind of throw into that. But I want to explore and I want to help people lead themselves better so that they can be there for others.
Yeah.
And part of that is really learning to accept boundaries. And I touch on that a little bit and you had me at no, but the concept of, you know, you've heard if you want to have friends, you have to be a friend. If you want to have boundaries, you have to accept boundaries. So what does that look like from the, I can hear someone say, I'm sorry, I can't support you in that way right now. And I can accept it and go, cool, I'll figure something else out.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously we're talking about your book and you had mentioned the highly sensitive person
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
Is there any other book that stands out that's inspired you and made an impact on you
Yes.
that you could share?
Yeah. So The Big Leap
Okay.
from Gay Hendricks. I reread that book every year. It's absolutely amazing. And Essentialism. And I don't remember that guy's name. I think it's James something. But that book, I've read it 3 times now because it talks about really narrowing down your focus. And the one line I loved from that was priorities has only been a plural in the last like 10 or 15 years. The word
Yeah.
used to be priority
Yeah.
because it was the one thing that mattered. So loved that. Highly recommend that book. But yeah, The Highly Sensitive Person, #1, if you consider yourself an empath, if you feel that sensitivity, like it gave me permission to be me.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't feel that, but you're curious enough about
Yeah.
other people,
Yes. Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
All right, Sheryl, and wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything else you want to share that I might not have asked about? Anything at all? The floor is yours.
Check out the book. If you go to my website, you will very shortly, I haven't done it yet, but it's going up there. You'll see the survey. You'll be able to get a direct link to the book and you can see my speaking topics. I love going into organizations, both for profit and especially nonprofit, and doing workshops with their teams because it improves the teamwork, it improves the communication, and it just makes for a better working environment for everyone. So check that out as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And today, again, we were covering Sheryl's own book, You Had Me at No, How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity. Sheryl, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Absolutely. And if there's anything that I might have missed, we're limited on time. I know I dragged Sheryl down some rabbit holes, but if there's anything that you're curious about that I didn't ask about, please reach out to me. I'll reach out to Sheryl, see what kind of additional insights, guidance, knowledge I can get from her. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.